All right. All right. So this be a fairly short one. This is to round out Unit 1. This is Chapter 26, Stress and Associated Problems. I believe this is on page 615 in your book. So stress response in the body can be kind of multifactorial, a little bit complicated, but it has a lot of systemic body effects. So overall, um, one thing about stress is it has a general systemic response. Our body responds to change. It messes with homeostasis and it's part of homeostasis. Again, homeostasis is like a loop or a seesaw, right? Of balancing our body out. So our body wants to stay balanced, and for compensating with minor changes, that's the goal. But a stressor can kind of change body function by messing with homeostasis, and that's what a stress response will do. So the words, whoops, sorry, I went a little bit ahead. So the word for that, something that creates a significant change in the body function, and this could be emotional stress, this could be physical stress, like from a surgery, this sort of stuff. And so to answer that kind of question, what would you call something that is affecting the body, a significant body change? So these are your options. I'll give you a second to pause. It kind of led into this one, obviously. Kind of forgot what my question was for a second, but it is a stressor. A stressor is the term that says anything that can cause significant change in the body. So an infection, those kind of things, all of those can be stressors. And a surgery, emotional, all that stuff can be a stressor. So our stress response in general is a review. Um, you might have heard the stress response dictated as something like flight or fight response. And the concept with that is that stress causes heightened sense of awareness, physiological changes, increased heart rate, blood flow, those kind of things. And that's going to induce a fight or flight. So a lot of people tend to be a person that's going to fight, for whatever's going on, or run or flee. That's the flight part, but creates a heightened sense of awareness. If you think of the stress response, a lot of us have driven in Nashville traffic, or maybe we haven't, but we've driven in traffic. And sometimes you'll have a moment where you have to hit your brakes real hard. It's a close call, or you almost get run off the road, or something dangerous like that happens. And at least it's happened to me. And sometimes you'll start breathing real hard, and you'll get a kick, and you'll feel like a lot of people call it the adrenaline is running, that sort of response. That's your body's response to stress sometimes. And that can manifest itself in a lot of physical ways. It can, again, this what the stressor is that causes this response can vary, but that's the response that we're talking about. So severe and prolonged stress of any kind, physical or mental, any of those sort of things, basically has a lot of factors. It's going to increase wear and tear on tissues. It's going to basically exhaust a lot of your metabolic resources. And then if you have any chronic conditions, a long stress response or a prolonged stress response can really exacerbate those things like COPD, those sort of things. So GAS is talked about in the book, but kind of this first page, basically what they define this as is a general adaptive or adaptation syndrome, general adaptation syndrome, GAS. So GAS is part of this flight or fight response. There's an alarm stage. So the hypothalamus senses this, your nervous system kicks into gear, adrenal glands are going to release their norepinephrine and epinephrine. If you talked about this at all in A&P, but the adrenal glands are the glands that are superior on top of our kidneys, and they release what's called catecholamines, which is basically norepinephrine and epinephrine. And uh, these are responses that will kick in the heightened sense of awareness and start the stress response. And the hormones will level out or keep elevating. The body kind of is operating on peak performance. Excuse me, peak performance. So heart rate up, awareness up, those kind of things. That's the resistance stage. And then the final stage is basically it's going to resolve. GAS says this is going to resolve. The stressor will go away, or there'll be a cool down period, or it lead to death. And that would be something with a severe injury causing other physiological. But stress can have this whole body effect where you can only ramp up so far, and there has to be a kind of a cool down phase after the resistance stage. And we've all kind of felt that lag after a stressful event. You're going to feel tired and fatigued and worn out, and that has a lot to do with the hormones and the general GAS response. And so, which stage of GAS involves mobilization of defense? I'll give you a second to answer that. Okay. You answer the alarm stage, you're correct. So basically, there's alarm, resistance, and the final stage, which means we're going to start to drop off and recover, hopefully. So, significant effects of stress. So, if we're talking about the body and the kind of physiological part of this, elevated blood pressure, increased heart rate. This is because blood vessels tend to vasoconstrict and in certain areas, vasodilate in certain areas, so increased blood flow, and the hormones involved are going to mess with heart rate and blood pressure and to prepare you. So you can imagine this like flight or flight response, as if a scenario like you were walking down the street, minding your own business, that sort of thing. And then, I don't know, just a really mean looking dog comes around the corner, is growling at you, and you know it's going to come after you. Well, in that moment, that's the heightened sense, is the stress response going to kick in. So your body is doing all these things to prepare you to fight, or to prepare you to flee the situation, fight for your life, and that's an elevated stress response. And that's kind of what happens. You were fine walking down the street, but then when this kicked on, your blood pressure is going to go up, heart rate's going to go up, your lungs, the bronchioles in your lungs are going to dilate so you can breathe, so you're more prepared to run or fight, whatever that is. More blood glucose levels will rise so that you have more energy for whatever the fight or the flight is going to be. And the whole central CNS, the whole central nervous system in your brain, just kind of go off the rails, or go heightened sense of awareness kind of comes from. And then they decrease other functions in your body so that they can have more energy and metabolism for these other functions. So your inflammatory response is going to go down, immune responses go down. And that's why sometimes too, like if you imagine, you may not dealt with this scenario, but there's been scenarios too where someone has a car accident, some kind of heightened sense of stress response. Maybe they don't have pain initially because the adrenaline and those catecholamines are running, and they don't feel really the pain. The inflammation and the pain receptors are kind of overcrowded by all the other sensations of the central nervous system. And then after that kind of final stage of GAS and the cool down phase comes in, then they start to hurt. This inflammation, the responses kind of kick in. So the book highlights something basically referred to as positive and negative stress. Positive stress has a word that's eustress, basically, or eustress is how you would say it. Eustress. Eustress is encouraging. So think of things motivating, motivation, efficiency, creativity. So like for some of you that are type A people, that kind of sense of accomplishment you get from, crossing something off a checklist, or if you're a DIYer or someone who likes to work with their hands, when you accomplish something, it's a little bit of a a euphoric experience, and that's eustress. Some of the same hormones are involved in those sort of things, but it's typically associated with positivity. And negative stress will be known as distress, or distress. I'm in distress is a negative, and that's where we get these negative, prolonged physiological responses. So stress with disease processes. So a lot of things are related to stress when we go to disease: headaches, stomatitis is ulcers in the mouth, or other periodontal diseases. So diseases causing ulcers in the mouth, erosion of your gum lines, things like that. And then a lot of times, again, if we have prolonged stress response, maybe like nursing school. That's why it's important to take breaks, right? And not get overwhelmed immediately. But they can kind of impair function, decrease blood flow to certain areas, especially areas like the kidneys, which are really important for blood flow, and our GI tract. Because we're shunting blood to other places and vasoconstricting and constantly preparing for this fight or flight. And there's also just some uh, precipitating factors for other diseases, the chronic infections or just emotional distress can take its physical and mental toll on you. So these are some of the specific problems that come with that. So what physiological response is associated with negative stress? Give you a second to answer. If you answer number 3, you're correct. Increased heart rate. And it's going to kind of do the opposite of some of these other ones. Enhanced creativity, that's more with that euphoric type of stress, positive stress, eustress. Decrease blood glucose levels, no. Negative stress, distress is going to increase these, that fight or flight response. It's going to suppress or decrease immune response, but it is going to increase heart rate and increase blood pressure. So some of the other potential effects of severe stress: renal failure, that goes to that prolonged vasoconstriction, and that causes damage to the kidneys, typically ischemia, which is again the damage to cells from lacking oxygen and blood flow. Stress ulcers in the mouth, in the GI tract. That's the combination of the steroids that are released from the adrenal glands, the hormones that are causing some issues, and the vasoconstriction. And this general infection, because it not only is causing this uproar of things, but it's causing this depression of our immune response, our normal immune response. And so it could lead to infection. So these are kind of the big 3. These would be the need to know for thinking about, long-term stress. What are like the worst case physiological scenarios? Renal failure, ulcers, infection, those kind of things. Also, you would kind of tie on to that as need to know is just piggybacking off the delayed immunity is slow healing, um, um, related to post-traumatic stress disorder as well as an actual disorder. It can be a diagnosis depending on what the event was. There's usually an event tied to post-traumatic stress disorder. But that's why patients have to be able to deal with emotional stress and other things to keep these levels down post-surgery, post-op. It's better wound healing if someone's dealing with a lot during surgery, things in their life, then it makes recovery that much more difficult on the body. So how do we cope with stress? Well, most of these things you've heard of before. These are pretty generic, but I'd say these are need to know, but most of you have heard these before. And proper rest and diet and healthy lifestyle choices, finding solutions to deal with whatever stressor is causing the stress. Again, exercise, take time to just engage in distracting activities. If that's you go for a round of golf once a month or something like that, or you go to a book club or read a book you enjoy or watch a show you enjoy, take a break from studying, those kind of things. And there's always counseling, other supportive measures, and then just general relaxation techniques. These can be really good before exams and stuff, especially since we're in the nursing school world here. Deep breathing techniques, mainly just 3 really good breaths in through your nose, out through your mouth before an exam. You'd be surprised how much that can bring down the kind of overall stress response you're having. So some questions: what's the potential effect of prolonged and severe stress on the kidneys? This one, again, pretty straightforward, related to that vasoconstriction and kind of the suppression of blood supply from some organs to other organs, and renal failure. If you had number 3, that's correct. And on the same vein, what can prolonged vasoconstriction lead to in the body? Give you a second to answer. That's right, ischemia, lacking oxygenated blood flow. And finally, what is one significant effects of stress response on our respiratory system? Think about, again, stress, fight or flight. We're getting ready to run or fight. We need, what would happen if we're like in that situation? What do you think your lungs are doing? Answer is bronchodilation, which again, more open airways sounds good, but that has negative effects over time. So the key to this chapter is short and sweet. Kind of know the worst case scenarios that can happen to someone's body physiologically from stress. And then the other is just keep in mind the fight or flight response is what does it affect? The fight or flight response is going to affect your vasculature, the vasoconstriction. It's going to ramp up the central nervous system. It's going to release these hormones called catecholamines, which is norepinephrine, epinephrine. That's an A&P reference there. And they are going to have prolonged effects and by increasing blood glucose. And so long term, it can lead to some not so good outcomes. So that's chapter 26, stress and associated problems. Continue in the unit 1 information. All right. Very good. Thanks for watching, guys. Y'all have a good night.